that's exactly the issue. It's like people say these things like, oh, we want Bitcoin to only be money. And I didn't really think we were going to get into this part of the discussion, but hey, it's probably a good time as any.
Yeah.
Because it's very topical right now. You mentioned knots. You want to explain, do you know what knots is?
Yeah, I briefly know, a little bit about knots, where they just want to reduce the relay limit for nodes, transactions, maybe 80 bytes, 40 bytes in op return, but they got something BIP 110. They might want to just totally abolish op return. I'm not sure what their plans are. That seems like they're going off the deep end.
Yeah. So there's people will, if you study Bitcoin a little bit, you'll run into what's called the block size wars. And that was like years ago, there was this big, and Bitcoin isn't known to be the fastest, most highly, the quickest, something like 7 transactions a second. How is the world going to run on Bitcoin when you can only do that? And it gets into like a block is only created every 10 minutes or so, and how you can only put so much, there's a limit to how much you can put in any particular block. Well, there was a movement back in the day, and I won't get into all the particulars, but there was some camp that said, we need to make these blocks a lot bigger. So even though they only come out every 10 minutes, we can put a lot more stuff in them. And that way, we can handle more transactions, more monetary movement, because on the Bitcoin blockchain and native. And then there was other people who said, no, we want to keep them small because part of the advantage of the Bitcoin network in itself is having lots of people running nodes that are participating in, securing the Bitcoin blockchain. Now, people, if you're not familiar, there's a difference between a Bitcoin node and a Bitcoin miner. A Bitcoin miner is a special piece of hardware that looks for blocks, and it's a completely separate topic. We won't get into that, but just understand that when we talk about nodes, we're talking about something that this isn't one. Well, this is actually a miner, but I mean, this is a BitAxe, but it runs in a similar set. I've got one over here. I can't show it on camera because my cord is too short, but something like that.
How many BitAxes you got?
Just the one. It's been giving me.
Is it fried?
No, it's weird. It was like, it wasn't working well, and I took it, and I at TabConf here in Atlanta, we have TabConf in October where all the Bitcoin developers come, and I took it and I talked to the guy named Scott that runs the Bitcoin. I'm looking at it, and then he's like, I think the power supply that we were giving out at that time, I had gotten it the year before.
Is it a Gamma?
No, I think, is this the Gamma? I don't think so. It's a 601. Anyway, it's what they were giving out.
Yeah, I think those are Gammas. Or maybe it's 601. Yep.
Yeah. So anyway, it wasn't working. It wasn't hashing for some reason, and I was like, I took it to him. I was like, hey, what's going on with this thing? And we put a different power supply that had a little bit better amperage on it, and it's like, well, it's working now. I'm like, great. And I brought it home, and he gave me the power supply that was working great at TabConf. I brought it home and I plugged it in. I'm like, well, it's still not working. And I think it's something to do with some of the parameters I've set up, but I haven't spent time.
Yeah, you can edit it. Yeah, just log into it.
Yeah.
Axos.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, the point in showing you that was that I've got an Umbrel Pi running over here, and it's all wired up, so I can't show it on camera, but it's literally about this big. And, I think you can get one that is a Pi 4 with external, like terabyte hard drive SSD. We're talking $500 maybe, right? And it's, it's powerful enough to run a Bitcoin node. Now, to do that, you can run a Bitcoin node in 2 ways. We can go a full Bitcoin node, which has every single transaction since the one you mentioned, right? The very first Genesis block.
2 terabytes probably, though, for that, right?
All the way up to today, yeah. And now it's getting close. It's somewhere in that 1 terabyte range. It's getting to be. So it's pretty small, modest. I mean, most people who are interested could spend that much money and be helping the network by running their own node. There's privacy advantages for doing that as well, but just the fact that it can be done You could do it on an old laptop if you want, or something like that. Anyway, back to the wars, the block size wars. If the people who had like wanted the bigger blocks had won out at that time, then the number of people being able to run Bitcoin nodes would be smaller, right? And the point was that more nodes is more important than more stuff in the blocks, and that was just finally settled. And the result is that it's still to this day manageable to have a node running with the full blockchain history on it.
Yeah.
And running in your home. And if you look into Ethereum as an example, their whole blockchain, it's like terabytes of data. It's like no one can reasonably, unless you're completely crazy, no one can really run an Ethereum node that's a full node. And which means, again, another attribute, it means that these nodes can only be run by like hosted providers that manage this stuff. And if you look into it, you find that for Ethereum, most of the nodes that are running the full thing are actually managed by the same hosting company.
Yeah, it's Bitcoin only for me, and Bitcoin will scale in layers.
Well, I think the point of going into all this is to kind of say, look, these are all trade-offs, right? Mm-hmm. And Bitcoin has decided that there are certain trade-offs. Well, one of the trade-offs that's come up more recently is like how much extra data can you put in a transaction? And the Bitcoin Knots is actually a fork of what's called Bitcoin Core, which was the reference implementation of the software that runs on the nodes, not the miners. And a lot of the monetary purists want to say, look, we're going to like change the rules in order to keep the block size small, make sure that only monetary types of transactions make it into new blocks. And the people that are running this Knots, actually, I think it's just still one guy, took the core he didn't write all of this from scratch himself. He takes the reference implementation and then he modifies it enough to tweak a lot of the parameters and basically set them as default to smaller values, in which case it would then not approve certain larger transactions, larger not in value but larger in just size.
Well, it just wouldn't relay them, right? The nodes wouldn't relay them.
Yeah,
They'll
won't
still
relay
show
them
up and download once they're mined.
If they're mined, but then the question becomes like if everybody does this, then nothing will get mined and approved.
That's true.
Fall into this thing. And so there's been a lot of contention about whether or not this is allowed, because like, what does that mean? Is that enough or too much? And another thing, I'll just put this in, is this BIP 110 rate is a new proposal that temporarily limits the size of data fields at the consensus level.
Okay, so it's not just relay policy, it's actually changing the consensus.
Yeah, so this is like a proposal right now, and it's not, so this isn't like law. This hasn't made its way into the core code that everybody uses yet. And one other thing to mention is that recently the team that works on the original reference, what we call Bitcoin Core implementation, in their last release, they lifted a lot of these limits. So theoretically, the amount of data you could put in this extra field called op return was limited to the size of a block. So it could be huge comparatively. And the fear was that by relaxing those limits, that it would induce incentives to put non-monetary data in the blocks and crowd out monetary data. So so that was kind of the discussion. This proposal would kind of make permanent a more restrictive situation. I'll scroll down to this. So they talk about it here a little bit, but how it works. So new outputs will be limited to 34 bytes, except op return, which allows up to 83.
So this doesn't even affect Spaces protocol.
No, it does not.
So Spaces protocol is compatible with Core, with NOTs, with BIP 110.
Yes.
That's good. That's good news.
Yeah. And I had one of the developers on a call the other day, and I asked him exactly this, and he was like, yeah. I think he said that a commit, like a commit to a zero knowledge proof tree. I know we're jumping ahead to some other aspects, but I think he said that one runs at like 48 bytes or something.
For the subs, it's 40, and for the top level spaces, it's 60.
Right. He said all the bidding activity when you're kind of contending for a top level name is all also in the 60 range. So it's like within this 83 bytes. So, but it brings up this interesting question, right? Which is like, well, I mean, if you're so worried about non-monetary uses, why are you allowing this at all?
Yeah. Why not make it zero?
Why not make it zero?
But I guess it's a good compromise, right? Because they're conceding here by setting this that, you know what, it is useful to have information and op return on Bitcoin.
I think so too. I think that's exactly what it is. It's kind of a tacit concession that, well, we don't want like abusive data use of the blockchain, but we want a little use of the blockchain to do a few things that we've already shown. Again, going back to the open timestamps, we've already shown that it's useful. Actually, another use case, since we're kind of talking about this, is there was a county, I can't remember the name of it, in Georgia. At the last presidential election, they had lobbied their whoever their legislature at the county level is to, as they were reporting precinct level election results, that they were timestamping them with open timestamps and publishing them during the process of doing the final tabulation.
Wow.
So you couldn't change the tallies later in the process, right? If we talk about the other contentious elections, whether domestically and abroad, there's always this question of like, well, you're using all these electronic machines to like gather the vote totals, and then you're rolling them up into some like aggregate vote total. How do we know that you didn't change something along the way? Just, let's just get rid of a few votes here, add a few votes there. Again, going back to the whole thing Julian Assange said, it's like you can't go back and change something. It's like if you do this, you're laying evidence that can then be at least reviewed critically if there's some contention about it, which in my mind is pretty awesome property, right?
Yeah. Yeah, Bitcoin's extremely valuable. People are going to use it.
Well, this is also interesting. So this BIP 110, the person that put it forward, it was called something else before when it was in the draft state. And so they like created these new rules and restrictions, and somebody took his proposal of how to restrict it, which was like, I think like a couple page PDF document, if equates to, and he encoded it in a way such that it adhered to all the rules that the thing was proposing onto the blockchain. So it was kind of an interesting sort of like proofs, like here's your proposal of how to restrict arbitrary data getting put on the blockchain, and somebody took it and found a way that adhered to all the new proposed rules, and still put it on the blockchain.
That's funny.
So it's like where there's a will, there's a way, right? Humans are very innovative folks, and especially when they get challenged with like, oh, you can't do that. What do people do? It's like, well, I'll show you that I can do that. So it's like, does imposing these restrictions really prevent anything? People either find a way, or it maybe makes situation worse by finding a way. maybe it's better just to like, just let the market be the market.
Yeah.
And like, if people want to pay for crap on the blockchain, well, then that's duty. They're like the price will go up or will equate to a level that tolerates whatever.
Now there was something I heard about, they were going to rug some UTXOs if it was under 1,000 Satoshis or something. Is that included in here as well?
No, I don't think so. There's another thing going around.
Because that's out of control. I mean, you're going to wipe people's UTXOs, freeze them, make them unspendable, whatever they're going to do. I mean, I think you can't do that. You can't touch people's UTXOs. I don't care what.
I don't remember what it's called, but there's like
it was called the cat or something.
Yeah, there's a kind of a clean. What they're kind of talking about. They're titling it like a cleanup effort, like hey, and we mentioned this, like, I don't know. Last I checked, it was like 800 gig. Is that right? 800 gig or so of data for the full Bitcoin blockchain. It still grows.
Yeah, something like that. Well, I thought it was a terabyte,
but it was like, yeah, it's kind of, I think, closing in on a terabyte. Anyway, it was like there was an initiative put forth to actually go and clean up the blockchain. It's like basically go back in time in all the places where huge amounts of data were on the blockchain. Is like basically truncate them and then restore everything, because you could do that and then still keep all the checksums the same for those blocks.
Seems dangerous to do that. I don't know the details, but that's risky.
Well, the net effect of it, and even this itself as well, this proposal talks about temporarily restricting certain things. Risk of frozen funds theory. Yes, the proposal goes, I think, as I've heard about this thing, and I don't know all the particulars, but theoretically, some early funds could be either not moved forward. And maybe I'm conflating this with some of the proposals for like quantum resistance, but potentially that there could be some keys that are unspendable for a time period. And if this actually goes into effect, then I don't know, you get some like, time period where you could like migrate your funds forward if you were in a vulnerable address or something like this.
I don't like that. Like, that's a lot of control.
It's all messy. Yeah, it's all feels very messy. And at the end of the day, all this stuff is like, these are like people deciding stuff, like making value judgments about what's worthy and what's not worthy. And, I think we've learned that's like when humans make value judgments, then there's always going to be like picking winners and losers. And that's just not what Bitcoin's core ethos was all about.
And people are going off the deep end. They're like, rug the spammers. They're willing to just rug their UTXOs. These are Bitcoin, we're talking about here. And people are crazy. They grab the pitchforks, ideologically driven. People can get into a cult and do some wild stuff. And in this, I don't know a lot about it, but learning about it doesn't seem that bad. But freezing people's funds, rugging people's UTXOs, man, I'm definitely against that. That's crossing the line for sure.
Yeah. This is kind of today's like holy war in the Bitcoin space right now.
Right. Because you could see this opens it up to, well, that transaction was used for something illegal. That transaction was used for war, for rape, for this, for that, for something horrendous and terrible. You could see, this country declared war on this country. No transactions from these areas, these IP addresses. We have to make a adjustment here. Rug, like let's say a country bombs another country, does something horrific, and then the country's going to say rug their UTXOs. Everyone's going to be for it because that country bombed and did something horrific. So everyone's going to say rug their UTXOs, they'll be all for it. Well, we can't allow that type of stuff. That Bitcoin has to remain decentralized where people can't put these types of controls in place. So it seems dangerous.
That's my feeling as well. And that, we've gone this whole from the inception. So it's 17 years or so to this point. keeping the ethos of what was intended with the original authors in place. And it has grown to serve, and be the only thing that kind of exhibits these properties, no central authority, complete autonomy. Yes, it's not private per se, but that's, one attribute that we've all lived with from the get-go. But it's crazy, and we'll see. I mean, the block war. The good news is the block wars, I think, resolved to a reasonable state. I think this topic will resolve to a reasonable state.
Yeah.
And it's probably not worth all the getting worked up about. But
yeah, it's probably a nothing burger, but it's
but people do get passionate, and
yeah.
I like passionate people. So
real quick before we move on, I just want to say I'm not necessarily in favor of core either, where they increased the relay policy, opened up the opportune, they, because one of the things is they didn't listen to the community. Like a lot of the community didn't want it, and they went ahead and made the change, even though they might say,
right.
Oh, it decentralizes mining better, whatever the reason was. Still, the fact that they weren't listening to the people made them feel like they didn't have a voice, and now they're like, all right, we're going to make a change. Screw you, and it created us versus them.
Yeah, I think so, and I think you're right. I think that that if there was a really good argument for, and I could say, just letting the free market reign is a good argument.
Yeah.
But what the core team didn't do was seemingly allow that argument to be made, and they weren't able to express that position in a convincing way with time for ample, objection and reaction.
They shouldn't have forced it through. Yeah. That
dialogue wasn't, they decided that dialogue wasn't, didn't need to happen. And a lot of this was the response to that.